All right, well, hello everyone. It's just 3 o'clock here Central Time, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll be admitting people as they come in. So if you see me kind of looking around or distracted here, at least at the outset, it's simply because as people are trickling in, I'm simply trying to add them here to the call. So thank you all for taking time out of your day to hear about what's going on in Sudan and in South Sudan. I'm just extremely grateful that you all have care so much about what's going on and want to make a difference and at least keep updated with what's going on. So, for those who maybe have not joined one of these quarterly webinars before, I'll just briefly introduce myself. My name is Matthew Smith, and I serve as Senior Vice President at Sudan Relief Fund. And as a part of my job here in the US, working with many of our donors, one of my goals is just to connect people with the work that's happening on the ground there in Sudan and South Sudan so that you all get really an accurate and clear understanding of what is happening there. So the structure is typically about 25 to 35, if I'm possibly 40 minutes of content here that I'll be sharing through some photos. And then, again, people have sent in really great questions. I always get such fantastic questions from everyone. So, um, again, if I don't get to your question, if you wrote in, I'll flash my information at the end of the time here, and you can always write to me directly, or reach out to me via phone or email or however you wish, and I'd be happy to connect with you directly. So, let's go ahead and get started here, and I'll keep adding people as they come in. So this trip that I most recently took to Sudan and South Sudan, I actually just was there about exactly 1 month ago. So I was there through the end of January and then into the beginning of February. And this was my second time to the region in the last 4 months. I was also there at the end of October, beginning of November as well. When I was there at the end of 2025, the main purpose of my time there was to see both South Sudan as well as go into the Nuba Mountains of Sudan to visit Dr. Tom Katina, who some of you might know. And unfortunately, just due to security issues, we were not able to get up to Sudan to see Dr. Tom. So my entire trip was in South Sudan. So we rescheduled, and this most recent visit was specifically intended to go up into Sudan, into the Nuba Mountains, and really get a sense of Tom's challenges and ways that Sudan Relief Fund can support Dr. Tom Katina at Mother of Mercy Hospital amidst the civil war in Sudan that's ongoing. So a lot of the content that you'll be hearing about today is actually in Sudan. I didn't hit typically when I go on one of these trips, I hit a bunch of different locations. I travel all across South Sudan and Sudan. It's usually about 3 to 4 weeks in length. This trip was quicker, more condensed because we were pretty narrowly focused on just getting up to Sudan to see Dr. Katina. But I did also spend some time in South Sudan. So I'll update you first with some project updates of what is happening in South Sudan. So I always like to start with this map. Helps me get oriented. I hope it helps you as well. This is a map of the different states of South Sudan. And you'll see, basically this is about the size of Texas, South Sudan is. So from corner to corner, you can kind of think of it geographically of about that size. And for this trip, I want to focus your, at least for these next few photos that I'm going to be showing you, I want to focus you specifically in Western Equatoria. So that red section kind of in the bottom left part of South Sudan. It's a big state in that part of southern South Sudan. And that is where I was primarily visiting on this most recent trip in South Sudan. This region as a whole really represents the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world. Both Sudan and South Sudan. Each has their own issues, each has their own ongoing problems. But really, when it comes down to it, Sudan is in civil war, South Sudan is on the brink of civil war again. It has its own humanitarian crises. The basics are at such a premium in both places. So while the politics and the reasons for why each country, Sudan and South Sudan, are struggling are maybe slightly different, generally speaking, the needs are the same: food, water, medicine, education. South Sudan is still the poorest country in the world by GDP per capita. It's still one of the most dangerous countries in the world for humanitarian workers. And so, the needs here are pretty staggering. And so in Western Equatoria, Sudan Relief Fund, through our donors partnerships, have been heavily invested for many years. We have a number of exciting projects. And I think that the general theme that I want to convey in this quarterly webinar is really what I think is pretty exciting. Sudan Relief Fund has made strategic investments over many years in orphanages, hospitals, clinics, and schools that I think you're going to see in this presentation really becoming high quality premier facilities for the entire country. And I think that's pretty special. I mean, you all as donors and people interested in this work are playing a role in creating what I think are some of the best facilities in all of South Sudan. But as I said, it's really the basics that are at a premium. So for example, clean water remains there's staggering needs. Something like 60% of all of South Sudan do not have reliable access to clean drinking water, and even fewer have access to sanitation facilities. So what we see is things like scenes like this. I mean, I was taken by one of our partners. He said, "Hey, I need you to." This is in Yambio, South Sudan, so Western Equatoria, as I pointed out on the map. He said, I want you to see here where people are drinking in this location." So we drove about 30 minutes outside of town because he had heard, one of the partners that we work with had heard about, what people were drinking. So we went out there, and this is what we saw. So this is stagnant water that is collected. It's probably rainwater, and it's collected here at the bottom of kind of a steep area. And that water it's just, there's bugs on the surface. As you can probably tell, I mean, there's algae and things. I mean, it is not clean drinking water in the slightest. But this is the risk that you have to take when you don't have access to reliable drinking water. I mean, you have to drink something, so you end up drinking something that could potentially kill you. And this type of water is full of cholera. That's what's been spreading rapidly these days in Sudan and South Sudan. It's often a breeding ground for things like malaria because the mosquitoes gather there. And so it's a big problem. So Sudan Relief Fund last year, we made strategic investments in building water wells. We built over 50 last year, and we have plans to do a similar number, hopefully more this year, with the support of our donors. And with such limited infrastructure in a place like South Sudan, I mean, often communities will have to walk 3, 4, 5 kilometers to get to water that is dirty. This actually, I think, is a really great illustration of what I was saying earlier about how people will risk their life to get something that itself could kill them. You can see in the background of this photo where these kids are playing what looks like kind of a steep hill. I hope that is conveyed in this photo. So this was the dry season when I was visiting back in February. But in the rainy season, which is coming up in a short time, this land and this little hill here that you see will be really muddy and extremely slick. And so to access this water point where these people were gathering, you have to actually walk down that steep hill. And one of the community members, I actually filmed a video of them. I wish I could show video better in these presentations. It's somewhat difficult, but if you ask me for it, I'd be happy to send it to you. One of the women told me that this hill, often it's the women and the children who are fetching water, they walk down this hill, and in the rainy season, it becomes extremely slippery. And as least recently as last year, they had one woman slip and fall and die as she was going to fetch water, and another woman who slipped and fell, and she was pregnant and she lost the baby. And so again, and they're trying to get to water that itself is extremely dirty. I mean, they're bathing in the same water that they're drinking. So what Sudan Relief Fund is going to do in this community and the one previous that I showed you is we're going to be building a combination of solar-powered submersible water wells as well as hand pump water wells that are going to bring water all across this area in Yambio. So it'll be about 6 different water wells, probably 2 submersible wells, and probably 4 or 5, depending on how many we need to build hand pump wells additionally. So we're going to be bringing clean water to this part of South Sudan and so many others, and you're going to see some more evidence of that here soon. But what I wanted to underscore in sharing these photos with you all is again that not only are the needs great, but people are risking their life to access water that itself is full of contamination that could potentially kill them too. I'm going to go back to clean water in just a little bit, but sticking with this theme that I tried to outline kind of at the outset of this conversation, Sudan Relief Fund has been around now for over 25 years. And so we have been making strategic investments with trusted partners for many years now. And one of those partners that we've been working with in South Sudan is a group of Ugandan missionaries, the Brothers of Christian Instruction. And they run a primary school in this corner of South Sudan. And they are incredible men. I have had the opportunity to go out and meet with them a number of times and visit this school. And what started as a very humble school is now one of the premier educational facilities in this entire state in South Sudan. It has over 1,000 children. And it was previously just a primary school. But of course, primary school kids get older, and there's a need then for a secondary school. And so Sudan Relief Fund over the last 24 months has been involved in building up the new secondary school on campus here. So this just looks like a building. It's not the most inspirational photo kind of on its face. But what it represents, I think, is we are turning this school and these facilities into some of the best educational facilities in all of South Sudan. So now not only is there a primary school where the governors wants and many of the state leaders want to send their kids to, but now there's also a wonderful secondary school. So this is actually the dormitory where many of the boys will live. And this is the new classroom for the secondary school that is currently going up. We will then additionally be building a staff quarters and then as well a girls' dormitory. So we are continuing to build out this campus. Again, sticking with that same theme, just a short walk away from this school is the soon to be new Remenze Health Clinic. So that school that I just showed you is in Remenze. This is all in western South Sudan, but they're not exact. Many of these things aren't necessarily close to each other, even if they're in the same state, even if they are in the same state. But in this case, this clinic and that school that I just showed you are actually quite close to one another, and this is intentional. I'll explain why we're doing this. So you just saw that primary and secondary school has over 1,000 students. And then nearby, there's also a refugee camp and a camp for internally displaced people. So South Sudanese who have been displaced because of fighting in their communities, as well as refugees who have come from the nearby Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, even Sudan refugees who have come to this part of South Sudan. So there's this mix of what the picture I'm trying to paint is that there's this mix of, you've got a school of over 1,000 students, you've got the local community there in Remenze, you've got an IDP camp for internally displaced people, you have a refugee camp for people who have fled violence and fighting, and you don't really have any healthcare facilities. The nearest hospital is a Sudan Relief Fund hospital, but it is more than a few days walks away. So we put our heads together and thought, where can we strategically put a new health clinic that can help solve this crisis of healthcare needs in this area of Remenze, so that people don't necessarily have to walk all the way to Inzara Hospital, which you'll see here in a minute. So this is the ground that we've been now. Again, it doesn't look like much now, but hopefully by the end of this year, what you'll see here in this photo is not just the ground that's being laid and the foundation, but actually an entire new clinic. So that is in the works, and I'm excited to keep you all updated on that project. A few days walk away is Nzara Hospital, which is an incredible healthcare facility in this part of South Sudan. There's really no government-run facilities that are reliable in this part of Western South Sudan. St. Teresa Nzara Hospital really is the only true medical facility. And over the last 3 to 4 years, Sudan Relief Fund has taken an increased role in improving these facilities, and I think turning it into one of the best healthcare facilities in all of South Sudan. I hope you're kind of catching this theme here. So in the background of these photos, you'll see the newly built pediatric ward. So this was constructed and finalized towards the end of last year. And this construction site that you see in this photo is where we're going to be putting the new adult ward. And it'll almost look identical to that building you see in the background, the pediatric ward. It's a great blueprint. It can fit a lot of people, and the current adult ward is falling apart. So we've got the new pediatric ward that we've put up. We're building a new adult ward, which is going to be finished soon. And then we also have a NICU unit as well, a neonatal intensive care unit. I think I may have showed some photos of the kind of the groundbreaking back in November during the last webinar. Well, now you can see we've made some progress. The building has been constructed. The next step is to finalize the building, get the equipment in there. The staff is currently being trained, and I would guess probably by mid to late summer, this NICU unit will be fully operational and it'll be serving the community. And as you can imagine, there's a huge need where health outcomes are so poor in this part of the world, and specifically in this part of South Sudan. A NICU unit like this will save lives, so many lives. And this is just inside as they're continuing construction. A short stone's throw away from that hospital is an orphanage that some of you might know. St. Bakita Orphanage is an orphanage that Sudan Relief Fund has been involved with for many years now. Actually, even before they were here in Nzara, when they were in Tambora, Sudan Relief Fund was involved in this orphanage. And again, this is a facility that we have taken, we've gone to great lengths to, I think, make it one of the best orphanages in all of South Sudan. And I hope you'll see that evidence in some of the photos I'm going to share with you. There's now over 200 children at this orphanage. Some of them have been displaced from nearby communities and lost their parents in fighting. Some of them have lost their mothers in childbirth, which is all too common in this part of the world. But, each of them still has a smile and a story and a future. And it's because of these wonderful nuns here, the Blue Sisters, as they're called, an African order of nuns who have sacrificed everything to care for these orphans. So about a year ago, or I would say 2 years ago, when we started building these grounds, we had a dormitory where the children were sleeping, and we had staff quarters. But now I'm pleased to report that we've got a staff quarters, the dormitories, but then also a multi-purpose hall. We also have two latrines, one for the girls and one for the boys. We also have new water systems, as well as a guard tower for security and a fence around the perimeter and paths through the facility. So this is, I mean, the way that these grounds look, it really is a shining light in this part of South Sudan. This is me inside of the boys' dormitory here. And I mean, to see the children welcoming us and their smiles, and it's not really me that I mean, it's really you all. It's the donors that have really transformed this orphanage and this entire facility. So you can see behind me there, as I have a photo of us walking. These are the buildings, the dormitories, and the uh, staff quarters, and then the multi-purpose hall is in the near ground there. So, I mean, it's you go onto this campus and there's a guard tower and a proper fence and a gate, and you walk in, you've got these beautiful paths. Our next step is to kind of beautify the grounds a bit more, but it is a safe place and a safe haven for these children who have already suffered. And now our hope is that we can alleviate some of that suffering and then give them a future. And lastly, before we move to what I think is probably like more the main goal of this webinar today, to update you on what's happening in Sudan, I do want to also just show you some wonderful photos from a recently constructed water well in Juba, South Sudan, it's actually just outside of Juba, which is the capital of South Sudan. And a generous donor helped fund a new submersible water tower. We were able to go out and visit the well and got some wonderful photos. I mean, you can see this great clean water flowing. And oh, there's me testing some of the water for myself. But what I think is so cool about some of these projects, including this one, is that this was a submersible water tower. So, some of you may know about the hand pump wells, which are fantastic. But for bigger communities, we like to build a little bit more intricate of a system, and it's a submersible solar powered well system. And so the water is pumped from the ground up into a tank that sits above ground and is controlled by, is operated with a kind of solar panel on top. And so then people aren't, pumping it with their hand to get the water. They're actually going to, a spigot, as you can see here in the photo, and pressing it, and the water comes out that way. And you can create multiple water points throughout the community that all come from that one well. So you've got the kind of the tower where the water sits, but then you've got this water point. There's another water point for the school, another one for the community. So the picture again that I'm trying to paint here is simply that, yes, it's one well, one submersible well, which typically costs around 25,000 US dollars. But then you can create multiple water points from that, which multiplies the impact greatly. So I just wanted to show you some of those photos. This is actually what those tanks that I was describing look like. The water's pumped in to these tanks. They'll sit in these tanks, and then you can create multiple water points from that where water flows out to. So that was a very brief trip that I had through South Sudan. Again, normally I'm there for sometimes 2, 3, 4 weeks and visiting all over South Sudan. This last trip, I was really mostly in Western Equatoria and Juba, the capital. When I go back again, probably in the summer, late summer, I'll have a little more extensive of an overview of all the different projects from the various locations in South Sudan where we work. But as I said, really the main purpose for organizing this most recent trip was to get into Sudan and actually visit Dr. Tom Katina at Mother of Mercy Hospital, where your donations and support is really holding up the healthcare and nutritional system in this part of Sudan. So here's a map again of Sudan. So I want to direct your attention here to the bottom of Sudan in the state of South Kordofan. It's kind of right in the middle of the bottom part of Sudan, South Kordofan. That is the state where Dr. Tom's hospital is and where Sudan Relief Fund has been involved for many years now. As you probably know, Sudan has been in a brutal civil war for over 3 years. It's not getting a lot of coverage in Western media or really anywhere in the world, but it does represent, I think, the greatest crisis on earth in terms of just scale. I mean, the number of people that are in need, the number of people that are displaced, the numbers, I mean, are staggering. I can't even comprehend them. And I've been there and I've seen the need. And it's still hard for me to wrap my head around the scale of suffering right now in Sudan. The most recent update as it relates to Sudan Relief Fund's work and Dr. Tom Katina at Mother of Mercy Hospital is that Sudan has effectively been split in half again. So you've got one warring militia who is controlling the western part of Sudan. So you'll see North Darfur, West Darfur, all of the Darfur area. And then you have another military is controlling kind of the north and eastern part of Sudan. So Khartoum, Red Sea, River Nile State, all of that area. And where the two military lands are meeting is kind of right in the middle. So Dr. Tom and his hospital and where Sudan Relief Fund is working is the front line of this war now. And that has changed in the last 5 months. 5 months ago, that was not the case. There was still lots of fighting happening in other parts of Sudan. But right now, today, South Kordofan, this region in the southern part of Sudan, really is the front lines. And so this was a different trip for us, going in knowing that we were going into an active war zone. I mean, Tom has seen a lot. He's been there for over 15 years. He has seen multiple civil wars. This was my first time going in while there was an actual civil conflict and a civil war happening actually within the state. And I got to go to the front lines of this war and actually see with my own eyes what was happening and see the suffering for myself, assess the needs. And I hope that through some of these stories and photos, you'll get a sense of that too. So, when I was able to see Tom and I visited these, you can see us here. This was just 3 or 4 weeks ago when I had the chance to visit Tom. As I said, he's been up there for over 15 years now. He has had his hospital been bombed by the government in Sudan, when you can still see the bombs that didn't go off in the ground. He's been, I mean, he has been the center of persistent persecution and military persecution and military action against both him and the Nuba people in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan. And what he told me was that right now, this is the worst that he's ever seen Sudan. And this is the most challenging time for him and his staff at the hospital. And I saw it. I mean, I've been up there a few times before. And what I saw when I went up there was the hospital was the busiest I have ever seen it. They are seeing hundreds of patients per day, war casualties, people, refugees who are coming great lengths to get care. And because now the fighting is so close and drone strikes and fighting is happening just miles and not just, a handful of miles away from the hospital, the scale of the needs has just drastically increased. And so, I sat with him here and I talked with him for a bit. And of course, I always ask, Tom, what do you need? And the answer is always, he kind of looks at me, he's like, Matt, like, more medicines, right? Like that's what we need is more medicines. There's always going to be a premium for that. And so Sudan Relief Fund and through our donors are continuing to provide all the medicines to Dr. Tom and his hospital. And we have also many other projects in the Nuba Mountains this year too, beyond just the medicines going to Tom's hospital. But of course, like as you're driving around, like this is a foxhole, and because this is an active conflict zone, an active war zone. I mean, these are the things that I previously wasn't aware of, but now I am. Driving into a place like this, if you start to hear a military drone, this is where you jump. You jump into this foxhole, and that's just the reality of daily life in a place like Sudan, and specifically in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan. I know some of you, who have been following our work for many years and know who Dr. Tom is. You all might be interested in a personal update from him, and I think this is worth sharing. So this is Tom, and this is actually up near where he lives. This is his meager kind of compound and home area, and you can see, I mean, he lives just like the people of Nuba in a thatch hut. And this young girl that you see on the bed next to him is 4 years old. Her name is Zaitun, Zaitun, which I believe means olive in Arabic. And Tom and his wife Nasima are fostering her. So they have two adopted sons, and now they are fostering this young girl. The story that Tom told me when I was there is that her family has all died of starvation. And, her mother, her father, and all of her siblings died of starvation. So, they've taken her in, and Tom actually told me, he said, I can't even look at the photos of when she came into the hospital because she was so malnourished. It's too painful to look at. Of course, now she's doing a lot better. I even got a few smiles out of her when I was visiting. But that, I think, beyond just the medicines, the nutritional situation, the food situation in the Nuba Mountains is so poor. And that is really the main takeaway that I saw when I was there. But walking around the hospital grounds, as I said, I mean, it is the busiest that I've ever seen it. People are lined up by the hundreds to get care. And if they do get care at the hospital, which, the hospital, they see as many as they can per day. Often it's 400, 500 people that Tom is seeing himself per day. Often people have complications, health complications, and they're told they need to come back. Well, if they've come from a Khartoum or Darfur or other parts of Sudan that have been totally, wrecked by war, they're not going home. So they're just staying around. And so you see people kind of camped outside the hospital grounds who are, supposed to be coming back in a few weeks for treatment, but they're not going home. And so the grounds are just overflowing with people everywhere you look, with war casualties, with disease, with, often treatable things, but things that otherwise, if they're not treated, can be deadly. So we went to the hospital, as I just showed you, and then we also went all around Nuba Mountains because you might know that Sudan Relief Fund is beyond just our work with Dr. Tom and his hospital. We are also involved in standing up the nutritional programs across Nuba. So like Zaitoun and her family, who her family died of starvation. I mean, that is the reality for so many people in this part of Sudan. People are dying of starvation every single day. And so, with the overwhelming amount of needs, what can you do? Is you just provide as much food as you can. So, like this was at the site of one of the nutritional programs that we're funding, and I was able to visit that. As you can see, I mean, people just come. These are mothers with their children who are waiting to be assessed, and they just sit under these blue tarps in the heat, waiting to be seen. They're seen, and then they're given a nutritional supplement. It's often something called plumpy nut is kind of one of the standard things that we've been funding that gives the nutritional sustenance to these young children. It's a peanut paste that these children will get. And so these mothers are waiting with their kids, and they'll often receive this plumpy nut. And so this is me and my colleague David, and we had the chance to visit with the women and hear some of their stories. And so many of them have fled from places and other places in Sudan that have been, again, just destroyed by war. And it was heartbreaking to hear their stories. And many of them don't know whenever they'll be able to go back. But of course, there's still smiles. I mean, they're just people in the in bad circumstances, but they're people just like you and me. And so together, you, our donors, Sudan Relief Fund, extending a hand out, just trying to help people. And that's what we're there to do. But of course, the suffering is hard to witness. This is kind of on the grounds of that camp, and it's just extremely hot, very little shade, very little cover. But if it wasn't for these nutritional programs, often these children end up eating things like grass or leaves. I mean, Dr. Tom was telling me that they get children all the time with stomachs full of leaves because that's the only thing that these kids will eat. And these mothers think, well, I need to give my child something. So now that they have access to some nutritional supplements, such as that plumpy nut, I mean, that is really, it's going a long way to save a lot of lives. And, I try to meet as many people as I can when I'm there and just let them know that people in the US are thinking of them or praying for them, because otherwise, I mean, it's hard to kind of see where the hope is in situations like this. But of course, there's still smiles, and there is still hope in so much suffering. This is another healthcare facility kind of nearby that we visited. This is another place where Sudan Relief Fund has been providing medicines um, and nutritional supplements as well. This little boy, I heard his story. He came in, he was so malnourished that he couldn't even eat the plumpy nut. So they actually had to start him on a kind of a therapeutic milk substance and then work him up to the plumpy nut. But now he's, of course, doing a lot better. He was with his grandmother who was here, who was telling us his story. So actually, this is that milk that I was telling you. So there's this therapeutic milk that if a child is so malnourished, sometimes they can't even eat the plumpy nut. So they get started on that milk substance, and then they get moved up to these ready-to-use therapeutic foods, which you see on the right of the screen. So it's a kind of a multi-step process. But over the course of typically about 3 weeks, you can take a child who is severely malnourished, and if taken through the right steps, can be in a position where they're no longer malnourished and at a healthy weight. So it doesn't take much. These products are incredible. I mean, you can really save a lot of lives. It's just a matter of getting them to the people that need them. And that is a primary hurdle because Nuba and this part of Sudan is so cut off from the rest of the world. Oh, I wanted to share just quickly this story. I mean, you can see the mother on the left, and then I kind of zoomed in and took a photo of this baby, this newborn on the right. This is just one story, but it just is indicative, I think, of just the resilience of this population who have seen and been through so much suffering. But this woman, of course, I went over, I greeted her, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, your baby is beautiful!" Like, and then one of the nurses was telling me that this woman was about 3 days away by tuk-tuk, like a motorbike, and was in labor on a motorbike for 3 days traveling till she could get to this clinic to get seen and then gave birth here. I mean, the resilience and the fortitude and the strength of these women in the face of such suffering is truly remarkable. I mean, I was in awe. I mean, and how could you not be? And the children too. I mean, they endure so much suffering. This little girl had malaria and she was just getting her strength back. And so, Sudan Relief Fund has been standing up this facility for many years with medicines. And again, it just represents the impact that you're making. I've talked a lot about nutrition in this presentation, and the place that I saw the greatest needs was in these refugee and IDP camps. So I went to one called the Tobo camp. It's spelled Thobo camp. And on average, about 25 families were arriving to this camp. All of them were victims of this Sudan war. So they were fleeing the nearby cities that were under siege in this part of Sudan, because again, this area is the front lines of this war. They were fleeing the cities and coming into these camps seeking refuge. It's mostly women and children because the men are staying back and are fighting. So the women and children coming into these camps, I went to one, actually I went to two, but the photos you'll see are from the Tobo camp that I mentioned. So this little contraption here that I photographed is what they use to measure the children's arms to assess whether or not they are malnourished. So they'll wrap that around the upper arm of a child, and if it's in that red area, that signifies that the child is severely malnourished. If it's in the yellow, it's that they are malnourished. And then if it's in the green, it means that they're okay, at least for now. So when you really like, what was noticeable to me is I was kind of like messing around with the contraption there, and I was like, wait a second, like the circumference of the arm of a severely malnourished child is like the width of my finger. And that's what I tried to capture in that photo on the right. And that goes to show, I mean, when 30% of the children who are arriving to this camp are severely malnourished, so about 30% of the children, their arms are just about the circumference of one, maybe two fingers. That's how malnourished they are. And that's what they're showing up to. And there's really no other major aid programs who are here that are caring for these people. So we got to attend a feeding of the RUTFs, the ready-to-use therapeutic foods, otherwise known as the plumpy nut. And I got to actually be there and be present and actually hand some out. So this is me in front of, as you can see, it's mostly women and children. And I filmed a short video. We hope to share some of that in the near future, so be on the lookout. But this is just a still from that video of me standing in front of this crowd, and I'm holding actually one of the packets of the plumpy nut. And we got to attend a kind of a distribution and see, and then here you go, kind of we're handing it out to the kids. And if it wasn't for y'all's donations and support and partnership with our mission, I don't really know the scale of suffering that we would see in this camp specifically. I mean, it would just be almost too much to even think about. It already is bad enough. You've got, again, 30% of kids who are arriving severely malnourished. Hundreds of people are arriving every day, 25 families. Each family is a number of people. So hundreds of people are arriving every day who are severely malnourished. They're arriving with nothing. They're showing up. They have like makeshift blue tent tarps that kind of that's where they're living under, but no access to reliable food or water. So providing this food is so critical. And getting to see even just on the faces of the kids who are getting access. So this was me handing out some of the plumpy nut to some of the families and children. And again, in the midst of all of it, you see a smile. And I think like that to me underscores the resilience of this population and people that in the midst of such suffering in a camp that is cut off from the rest of the world where nobody else cares about what's happening to them, that, you, by providing this product through your support and donations to Sudan Relief Fund, are demonstrating your care, and there are smiles and there's still hope and happiness in such a place of great suffering. I was traveling on this trip with a couple of humanitarian photographers, and these guys were some of the photos and video that hopefully that you'll see that'll come from this trip in the near future where they helped film while we were there. And, they've been in war zones all around the world, and, there's needs everywhere, right? And I never want to take away from any of the needs in any other part of the world, but what they shared with me stuck with me. They said that this camp, this Thobo camp where we were, in this part of South Kordofan, Sudan, They said we've been in a lot of war zones, we've been all over the world, and we've never seen anything like this in terms of the suffering that we're seeing. And that meant something to me because I'm not often going into other war zones. I mean, I'm involved in this work with Sudan Relief Fund, but I'm not really going into, Ukraine or Gaza or other places. So to hear that from them underscored for me how important this work really is. That they've got some context, right? And so your generosity and support of Sudan Relief Fund is saving so many lives. Children like this little guy had been in the program for a few weeks, really was regaining some strength to the fact he was able to open up the packet himself and start eating the plumpy nut. So really was pleased to see that. But often you can tell from the children's hair how malnourished they are too. So if their hair is extremely discolored, often that's a sign of severe malnutrition as well. So just things that I'm learning and had no idea about. You see and you come face to face with pretty quickly in a place like this. And so, what is the future for Sudan in this part? I mean, the war is still raging as other conflicts have taken shape over the last couple of weeks. Sudan continues to be forgotten. And I think I want to just say a special thank you to you all for even just by joining this webinar, have kind of raised your hand and said, no, I'm interested. I want to know what's going on in Sudan. I want to make a difference. And so while so much of the world either is unaware or turns away or ignores what is happening in Sudan, which again is the world's greatest humanitarian crisis, you all have said, no, I want to do something. I want to be involved. So I want to say a special thank you to you all for joining, and especially a thank you on behalf of the people that you are serving, populations and communities like this in Sudan. So I'm going to leave up my information here. And, if you can take this down, my email, my phone number. And again, if you have questions that I don't answer here or that I didn't answer in my webinar here today, please reach out to me directly. It's my great joy to get to hear from donors or potential donors or people even that are just generally interested in this work and answer any questions you might have. So please feel free to reach out to me. I have a list of questions here. I've got 4 questions that I just kind of pulled at random, but were really good. I mean, we got a lot of really good questions. So again, I want to say thank you if you did write one in for taking the time to put some thought and actually, put yourself out there and ask a great question. So again, if I don't get to it, nothing against you, please reach out to me. I'd love to answer it. I just try to take a few to keep our time within the 45 minutes to an hour that we had allotted. So I got the first question, which I think is a good one for, especially if you're new to Sudan Relief Fund or you don't know much about us. How would you describe the organizational model of Sudan Relief Fund? So our model really is we keep our domestic staff small, but we have a great network of partners on the ground in Sudan and South Sudan. So we work primarily through local churches and missionaries on the ground in Sudan and South Sudan because they're the people who are there committed to the work through and through. That where, me flying in for a couple of weeks, I can assess things. I can kind of see what I see with my own eyes, but I'm flying in and out, right? So by having a smaller domestic program staff and development staff, but having a large, extensive partner network of volunteers and missionaries on the ground, we're able to really get a clear sense of what the greatest needs are. And then we also when we invest in projects and we put our donors' generous funds to use, we can have confidence that that work is going to be seen through because these are often the partners there are often local missionaries. You saw, like, for example, the Blue Sister Nuns, or like you heard about the Ugandan missionaries running that school in Ramenze. These are people who have been there for decades. Dr. Tom, he's been there for 15 plus years. So by having this great network, we're able to leverage our donors' funds to ensure that the programs that we invest in are actually going to get seen through and be completed, and we can have full faith and confidence that the work that we're investing in and that we're sharing with you all is getting done. And so that is our organizational model. Have a smaller staff, but a large network on the ground there who are our eyes and ears and can communicate back to us what the greatest needs are. And then we can act nimbly. And if we hear of a great need in if a conflict breaks out or fighting breaks out or there's flooding, for example, like there was last year in South Sudan, we're able to respond extremely quickly. What's one recent success story from the field that you saw? Well, that's great, and I actually am just going to draw your attention, I think, back to some of the projects I highlighted in South Sudan at the beginning of this webinar. Again, I think the orphanage, the hospital, St. Teresa Hospital, and the Remenze School, those three projects that we've invested in through your dedicated support over the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years specifically, have transformed each of those facilities, and I think have now made them each in their own way kind of top of their class in South Sudan. The hospital is one of the best hospitals in all of South Sudan now, and it's certainly, providing in a place where there's no government facilities. Same with that primary and secondary school that I talked about, and same with that orphanage. So I think like that's a shining example of where maybe the Sudan Relief Fund difference, as we might say, where we can make strategic investments in people that we trust on the ground there to turn things into premier facilities in a place where there's so much need. So that's, I think, a great example of success that we've seen, and it's only made possible through the partnership of our donors. Second to last question here, what are the most effective ways to make a long-term impact beyond just a simple donation? That's a great question. I mean, I think like, of course, a donation is a wonderful place to start, but if you're kind of trying to think long-term of like, yeah, okay, I can make a gift, but like I want to be invested in this work long-term. How can I make a long-term impact? I mean, one way that certainly we've seen donors, I think, make a real steady impact is through monthly giving. And the monthly giving is a way that you can kind of be a steady partner with Sudan Relief Fund so that we can have the ability to move quickly and nimbly to address needs as they come up. And by being a monthly donor, to me at least, that is a wonderful way to have kind of a sustained long-term impact from the donor side. And that allows, and that partnership with us allows us, as I said, to kind of move and act nimbly as needs pop up. So that's one example. Yeah, if you'd be interested in that, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'd love to speak with you more about it. And then number 4, I get this question a lot. It's a great question. What's the most effective way to make an impact when there's so much need? And that's the question we ask ourselves at Sudan Relief Fund. How when everything is in need, where can you focus? Where should you focus? And from the donor's perspective, from here in the United States, I understand. I understand that question as well, because it's like, well, okay, you've explained to me, Matt, through the course of this webinar, food, water, shelter, all these things, education, it's all at a premium. There's a huge need. Where do I even like where can I really target? Where can I be most effective? And I think it's simple. It's the basics. It's food, water, medicine. And I think if those three things are any of those three things that you would want to be involved in, please reach out to me, because I have wonderful, I think, projects in each of those three areas where we would love to have your partnership. And I think I could really clearly show you in conversation the ways that you can make an extremely effective and direct impact through either the provision of clean water, providing nutritional supplements like Plumpy Nut, or even providing shipments of medicine. All three of those things are at a need, and all three of those things are things that Sudan Relief Fund is involved in, and we hope to be involved in more in the coming years. The needs continue to increase. So to me, those three things represent kind of the greatest ways that you can make an immediate impact, because you got to keep people alive today for them to have a future tomorrow. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't also, as I've said, investing in civil society and that long-term vision as well. We want to see this region become a self-sustaining, long-term, successful project, both Sudan and South Sudan. We have to keep people alive in the short term, but long-term, that means investing in education. That means investing in civil society, vocational training, things like that. But in terms of kind of the more immediate needs, most effective ways you can make an impact: food, water, and medicine. And again, if any of those three things pique your interest or sound of interest to you, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk with you more. So that's our time today. We've kept it under an hour. I want to respect your time, and I want to say thank you. We're just so grateful and appreciative of your generosity, and support and interest in the work that's happening in Sudan and South Sudan. These webinars now are happening quarterly. So I would anticipate the next one happening here in the second quarter of 2026, most likely in probably, yeah, the end of June, I would guess. So be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, of course, reach out to me directly. Know of our sincere thanks, and we'll see you next time. Thanks and take care.